Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
So, Mike, I know I've been telling you about this. I'm so excited for who we have on today. We have on John Onwuchekwa, who is somebody who, I'm going to give a little bit of background on how I first met John. And first off, welcome, John.
No, yeah. I'm glad to be here. I actually forget how we met.
I usually forget everything. So
Okay.
this could be accurate. This could be loosely inaccurate. Who knows? But so we first met because you spoke at Plywood People in the West End at Monday Night Brewing. And I saw you speak and you gave a talk about hope. And I cried. I'm sure half the audience was. I mean, it was one of those things where you're like ugly crying. You're turning to the people next to you and you're like, okay, at least they're crying too. And you gave this just amazing talk about hope. And you talked about how hope makes all the difference. And you talked about how hopelessness can destroy communities. And it was an amazing talk. And it was just very genuine. And I just loved it. And it really spoke to me. Yeah. And we were looking for a speaker for a offsite we were doing with our team, about 200 people at work. And I was like, I love this talk because there's so many things where people in our jobs, Mike and I, work in corporate America, people get so bent out of shape about what to me are sometimes like the silliest things. And I'm like, you guys, there's real problems in the world. Yeah. And I sometimes think it's important to be reminded that there's like actual problems in the world and to, kind of adjust your mindset. So anyways, you gave this amazing talk. I reached out to you and was like, you're awesome. I love you. Would you come give a similar talk at this event? And you were awesome about it. You were like, yeah, sure. And it's like right across the street from where you live. And so you were kind enough, the timing worked out. You were kind enough to do it. And then we kind of continued a bit of a relationship because we continued to do some things to give back to the West End community through our company and a couple of things. And so it was just,
with the coats and all of that stuff.
Yeah, we did a big coat drive for an elementary school. And it was a lot of fun.
I do remember, I think when we first started to talk, one of the things that I shared was like, hey, if we're really going to do this, I'd love for y'all to be involved. Or I'm not sure if it was the Hope talk that I gave, maybe, where I talked about there's a lot of people that come in and take.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. And for it to be a year and some change later for us to still have this, like, this is special for me because there's not a lot of relationships that I have that start the way that ours did that actually.
I remember because you in part of your talk, you said there's a lot of people who come into this community and take, and there's not a lot of people who stay and give. And you like gave your analogy to like going to a barbecue and how empty handed and like what would happen to you if you showed up empty handed.
Right.
And so, and there were actually a lot of people at our office in our community who came up to me afterwards and were like, I heard what he said. I don't want to be one of those people. And so it wasn't just me. I think we all had this, like, we were listening, we heard you, and we want to know what we can do to give back. And you were awesome too, because there were certain things where we were like, well, could we do this? And you were like, well, here's actually what we need. And it was great. And so, yeah, you're one of the most kind of just real and human and inspiring people that I've met and had the pleasure to meet in person also. Yeah. And so just to give our listeners a little bit more of an intro, and then we'll kind of let you give your own version too. But John is a pastor, a father, an entrepreneur. He recently co-founded Portrait Coffee in Atlanta, which he'll talk about a bit today. He's a podcaster also. So your 4 in the morning podcast I've been listening to, I will admit more recently.
All right.
I heard that you launched, and then I kind of just, so many things are thrown at me. I forgot, honestly. And then I started listening to it and I'm like loving it. I have so many things. This is the longest intro ever, but I have so many things to ask you about, like the fact that you won't eat salad because it tastes like the outside. So many things I've learned about you through this podcast that maybe we'll have a chance to dig into some of it. So he's a podcaster. He's a leader in his community. So many more things. I think John embodies so many things about this topic that I've heard you talk about so many times, which is hope. And I just love it. So we'll dig in, but I just wanted to give you a bit of an intro so our listeners know who you are and how we got connected to you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That makes me feel special. That was a heck of an intro.
You're very special.
Yeah.
So, John, welcome. We're really happy to have you. Maggie gave a very long-winded intro about you. How would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
So I am, I think the most important things about me is that I'm a husband and a father. Those are the things that I enjoy most. So I've been married to my wife, Chandra, for 13 years. My daughter, Ava, she's 3.5 years old. And while this season has been tough on everybody in the entire world, I don't discount that at all. But I think one of the redeeming qualities, if you could use that word, has just been, man, Maggie and Mike, for the past 9 years, I've been, on a plane once or twice per month, speaking somewhere to do something. And this has been the first time, I remember it was, I think things shut down in March. And then we were 6 weeks in, and I just sat up and I looked up and I talked to my wife, and it's like, yo, this is the longest consecutive time I've slept in my own bed in almost a decade, right? And I've realized through all this time, as I picked up more things and try to do more things and try to inspire the world to hope, the most important thing about me is, man, I'm a husband and a father, and I love that more than anything else that I do. So, yeah.
I love it.
So that's me. Yeah.
I love it. And I will say, I love the interview with your wife also.
Oh,
because she does not mess around, and she holds you so accountable. And I just love the honesty and interaction in the conversation.
She does.
So we'll put a link to your podcast 4 a.m.
All right.
But I love in particular that discussion.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that we want to dig into with you tonight, John. But one of the things that we like to start with everyone on is, because we are a podcast that talks about money and personal finance and how to, improve that and have that add value back into your life. We really like to start every discussion with this question. So tell us a bit about how you were raised tell us a bit about how you were raised financially and what lessons you learned from your parents about money.
Frugal. So my parents, I'm the son of 2 Nigerian immigrants that came over. So my mom and dad came over. My dad in the early 70s left Nigeria and landed in Boaz, Alabama, right? So that just gives you a sense of all of what he had to endure as he came here. Did college here at the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, where he worked at a chicken factory while he went through college in 2.5 years on his own, paid for it himself. My dad is an entrepreneur. My mom is an educator, got her doctorate while she worked full time and raised 5 kids. So they have these motors, and they were just frugal, right? So I'm 36 right now, and I've been banking with Wells Fargo for the last 25 years. So that just gives you a sense of it. We would get birthday money, and it's you put it in your bank account. I worked at a job. My first job was at Chuck E. Cheese, and I got that first paycheck, and I thought, all right, $180. I'm about to live it all up as a 15-year-old. And it's all right, give X amount to the church. The rest goes into savings, and you get $20 to spend on your own. So my parents were big, save, be smart, be wise. And I wish that I would have paid more attention. There's one experience about money that's vivid in my mind. I was 17 years old, and a pair of Jordans came out that I really wanted to get, and I worked really, really hard, and my check was $175. I got it on a Friday, and on a Saturday, I spent $173.25 on the Jordan 16s, and they eventually were stolen. And I realized this is why my mom and dad had instilled it in me. So they're very frugal and smart and wise, and just,
And how do you live your life now financially?
So frugal, but wise. So it's in any marriage, I think you have one person that leans towards being more of the spender and the other person that's more of the saver. My wife is the saver, and historically I was the spender, right? So right now, we're really just trying to think about, our long-term financial future. So for us, we were blessed when we were getting ready to get married. As soon as I got out of college, we linked up with a group of folks and they helped us budget. So it was the first time in my life that I came up with a budget.
Were those folks just like friends, John, or like
Yeah, friends.
Okay,
so that
I love it.
Mentored us before we got married, and they just helped us understand that, hey, you have to know where every cent goes or you're not going to be able to direct this thing. And so my first year out of college, I was working for a ministry. I was in grad school trying to put myself through grad school. I worked part-time at a part-time at a school teaching and coaching. And I was making like beans. I think when I first graduated college, I was making $800 per month. So this is like poverty level type stuff. But I had all of this credit card debt from school. And in that first year and a half, I paid off all of my debt and saved up enough money to get a ring to propose to my wife. And we got married. And from that day on, we have a budget where every month we literally plan down to the cent of
that is awesome.
What we're going to do with all of our money. So we know where every bit of it goes.
That is awesome.
So I like how you had friends help you with the budgeting piece. Is there anything that you try to pay forward either with your daughter or with your church or with other friends? Like, are there lessons that you are now trying to help other people learn?
Yeah. So one of the big ones is I think a lot of people, when they think about their money troubles, they always think of it in terms of an amount and not the attitude that they have towards money. And so I found it's like, no. Like everybody with money finds themselves facing a problem that money can't solve. Like people that have money troubles, seldom is it just because of the amount. Often it's because of the attitude that they have towards it. Right. So one of the big things that we try to drive is, so I tell folks all the time, I'm a regular person, but I'm a person of faith. And what I mean by my faith is that I realize that there's something in the cockpit of like all of our lives. There's something that drives us. So I try not to focus on the thing that we all see, but the thing that's underneath the thing. And so here's what I mean. Most people think they have money problems, but what we try to tell our folks at the church is like, no, what really makes financial decisions tough for you is that money isn't money to you. Money is security, right? And when you put it in those terms, then you start to find out, you feel insecure about your appearance and how you feel. And what matters more to you than anything else is that people would approve you. So you live for the approval of people. And now money just becomes a tool for you to chase that. And that's why you come up with a budget and you have the plan in place, but you don't stick to it. Because when you have to make a decision, like logic isn't what drives people, right? We've all been in places where it's like, I know what I should do, but I don't. What drives us are our loves, what it is that we, love most. And so I'm trying to say, hey, I know you think you have money problems, but I really think that you have love problems. And until you find a security that is more stable then money, I think you're constantly going to be in the same place. And so I find if you start off with attitudes and loves and what drives folks, then you get to a place where you can really start to make headway when it comes to bad money problems.
John, that is so incredibly powerful and insightful. And we spend a lot of time talking about the same thing, right? Your mindset around money and people thinking that money drives happiness and having all this physical stuff or fancy clothes or fancy car or fancy house is going to create happiness. And people can get so caught up with like keeping up with other people. And like your example of, your insecurity driving, that you want people to feel a certain way about you. So then you feel like you have to spend a certain amount of money on clothing to look a certain way. And so I just love that you've gotten down to the root of, what's creating a lot of that, the fears and insecurity and tying it even just to the concept of love. And it's great that, first off, it's great that you had such strong foundations in your parents teaching you, because not everybody does, right? A lot of people we talk to are like, my parents never even talked to me about money. So I grew up having no benchmark or standards, or, nobody taught them how to budget. Nobody taught them that you don't spend more than you make. Right. That you aggressively pay off your debt the way you did. So I think it's amazing that you had such great influences in your life at a young age. And then that you've continued to, like we were saying, that you had that group of people that helped you to create a budget and get off on the right foot financially. This should be taught in schools, right? It's funny that like all the things they teach kids and they do not teach you how to deal with money.
Which is crazy, it is crazy. So one of the amazing joys that I have as a pastor is getting the privilege to marry people, right? So our church is at that stage where people are getting married now. So last year, 2019, I did 13 weddings, 13 folks in our church that got married. With every person that I marry, we require them to go through 6 weeks of premarital counseling. And one of those weeks is finances and budget. And so what we do is we sit down, and me and my wife have this sheet that we use, and it's, all right, you need to fill out this sheet. And it is, this is what I make. This is what this is what FICA, right, takes out. Here's the big chunk that they get. This is what I spend on clothes per month, on gas, on all of this stuff. And we're not shocked anymore, but people, they always come in and they're like, it's hard. I'm just, so broke and struggle. And once they physically see with their eyes how much money they spend each month, and we say, oh no, like you have all these loans, but you could literally knock out your student debt in 2.5 years if you cooked at home and you didn't spend so much on clothes that you're not going to wear. And so it's like at the end of the day, as y'all know, the financial moves that people have to make to fix things is easy. It's the motivation to actually follow through.
Yeah. No, I love that you require that as, first off, I think premarital counseling in general is a great requirement. It cannot hurt. It can only add value. And I love that there's a financial component because that will help their relationship be that much more successful when they have these conversations up front and they get on the same page and footing before they start their marriage or their formal relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome.
So we want to come back to a number of other topics, but I want to take a minute to talk about Portrait Coffee. So you've recently, and I know you're wearing your shirt. People can only hear us right now, but John's wearing his Pouring a New Narrative shirt. It's super soft. I love it. For all I was part of your Kickstarter, and so everyone got a shirt.
Okay.
I told you I'd be wearing mine, but one of my kids confiscated it and wears it, and I can't get it back. I've got my Portrait Coffee mug, which is one of my favorite mugs because it's like a diner style mug. It's like thick. It's just, I can't describe it, but it's like the best mug. My second favorite mug is my Friends on Fire mug. My first favorite mug is my portrait mug because it's an amazing mug.
And I'm not wearing anything because nobody told me this was going to be a thing, and now I feel like an idiot. So.
No, it's all good, man.
I never afforded you the Kickstarter, Mike. It's not your fault.
Right.
but you can go to their website and get one. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. Okay.
I'll send one.
So you've recently become an entrepreneur. You have launched this new coffee company called Portrait Coffee in Atlanta's historic West End. Yeah. I would love for you to tell us a little bit of just the history, how you got this idea, how you've launched this company.
Yeah. So I love coffee. Well, now, so.
You didn't used to like to drink anything that was hot, John. I
didn't used to. I had these little
you had
rules
a rule,
for
like
myself.
No hot drinks.
Yeah, and one rule was beverages aren't warm, right? Like there's a name for that, bathwater and soup, and neither of which I thought were particularly appetizing. So, all right, so there's that. I'm 27 years old, pastoring, teaching. My days start early, my nights go late. And I'm like, yo, Chandra, I've got to drink coffee and stay up. I need something. So we look at the house and all we have are the like Folgers crystals, the instant coffee that my mom and dad left at the crib when they was at our house. So I drink it and it's like, oh, this isn't as bad as I remember, right? And one of the things that you have to learn about me is I get into something and then I just start to nerd out, right? So I do that with coffee. And this is 2012, and it's right around the time that I get a chance to literally travel across the country and speak. So every time I travel, I tweet out where are the best shops in town, and I go to the shops. And every shop that I go to, I see the exact same thing, right? And what I see is, I walk into the front door in my ripped jeans, flannel, Jordans, and I look around. And I see the same like white bearded hipster, with the chest hair out, kind of wielding an axe. There's not a tree in sight, right? The pant legs rolled up. So I see it and it just feels to me like, all right, coffee is a place. It feels like every other school that I went to, right? Where I was the only black kid in my class and I really didn't know anybody that looked like me. And so I spent my time just trying to be like, surely there's other people that are involved that have this same passion. And I couldn't find anybody. So I just dig and dig and dig until I make my way to the inventor, right? How did coffee come to be, right? Who was the European dude that found out that this was the drink that it was? And I found out, oh, no. Over 1,000 years ago, there was an Ethiopian goat herder named Kaldi who is goat herding and his goats eat this cherry. And after they eat this cherry, like their hype just lit. And he's like, what is this? What is this? And finds out the bean or the pit of this coffee cherry can be roasted, ground, made into a drink. Coffee is invented Ethiopia, 800 BC. And so here I'm floored now because I'm like, I'm just trying to find somebody that looks like me that's involved. Come to find out coffee grows where, black and brown people grow. So this is something that it's like, it changed me, right? So now whenever I drink this cup, I feel like I'm drinking a sense of purpose. And so me, like, I love to share the things that I learned. So I'm telling everybody that I know, and everybody that I know is just floored by it. It turns out nobody knows this. And then the more and more I spend time, it really feels to me like an area of injustice, right? And where, when I moved to Atlanta to start this church in 2010, I parked my car and I rode MARTA just so that I could learn Atlanta. And it's crazy the things that you'll see when you're riding MARTA and you don't really have any place to go. So you just watch. So I start at the southernmost point of the train station and I ride north, like up through North Springs. And then I ride back down and I ride back north. And I saw it was this interesting, like, sociological experiment where, you start at Airport Station and go up through like Lakewood Heights, College Park, West End. And what you see is that the train's mostly black.
Yeah.
It's black people through and through. But then you get up to 5 points, and the further that you go north, there's two things that change. The inside of the train changes. The demographic of the train flip-flops. So you start south, it's mainly black. You get up north, and with each stop that you go up north, more and more black folks get off the train and more white folks get on. So the inside of the train changes. But the sadder part is that the further that you go up north, the outside of the train changes. The economic conditions improve, right?
Yeah.
So what you have is literally black and brown people in Atlanta are getting off the train. They're taking their exit before they can take advantage of the economic opportunities that surround them.
Yeah.
And then the craziest thing was the more and more that I learned about coffee, I found if you take the steps in the coffee supply chain and overlay it with the MARTA stops, the exact same thing happens. So
like it slowly becomes more and more white.
Yeah. So if the southernmost part of the supply chain are the farmers that own the land, right? That own this bean that is, a $250 billion industry. And the northernmost train stop is the $18 bag that you'll buy in the store as it goes through washing, exporting, importing, roasting, retailing. Things change. And we stepped back and said, hey, in a community like the West End, that is very much an opportunity desert, right? There's not industry in the West End. If you grow up in the West End, it's not like my dream is to build a career down the road. There's nothing here. And we said, man, if we can take an industry like that and change the picture that comes to minds when they think of specialty coffee, then we think that we have an opportunity to really change the economic trajectory and destiny of the West End and communities like the West End by just entering into an industry where I think that we have the competitive advantage because we have a sense of story and purpose, and we see coffee as more than just a product, but it's this platform to do good. So
that's why I love your tagline, pouring a new narrative, right?
Yeah.
There's this opportunity to pour a new narrative around what coffee actually, where it came from and what it actually means and stands for.
Yeah.
This story was like made for a Netflix documentary. Have you pitched this yet?
What?
No, it's like the whole metaphor of the MARTA stops going north compared to the supply chain.
Right.
I mean, this is Netflix documentary ground right
material,
here.
Yeah.
Well, that's
maybe that's next on his list.
Yeah.
Well, no. So me and my business partner, like he's the operations guy and I'm the storyteller. And as we kind of sat and talked, that was the linchpin that we just felt like, all right, we think this could be something special. And we thought that it would take people a long time, or we thought it would take us a long time to convince folks of that. But every time we retell that story, folks say, oh, yo, it's incredibly special.
Yeah, it's incredibly powerful. I hadn't heard the goat portion, which is not the big portion of the story, by the way. But that's not the message to take away here. But I thought that was interesting. But I had heard the rough story of this because you had told me when we sat down and met about this, a long time ago, and you were telling me this concept.
Yeah. And
I was like, it's an amazing. I didn't know that, right? I hadn't, and I'm sure I knew somewhere, had learned just kind of, the history of, where coffee was farmed and everything else. But I never really put the pieces together and thought about, those 18 steps in the supply chain and how it just slowly got whiter and whiter, for lack of a better description. And someone, to your point, someone is, making profit off each of those steps in the process. And the people who own the land and are doing the work and growing it are not the ones that are getting the majority of that profit. They're taking what, all that margin and markup is coming from, the 10 other people involved in it.
Right.
That creates that $18 bag of coffee that costs $2 from where, I don't know what the markup is, but wherever it came from.
Yeah.
John, I have another business idea for you.
Come on.
The same narrative applies to chocolate. It is farmed in the poorest countries in the world, but then gets shipped over to the richest countries like Switzerland and then becomes Swiss or Belgian chocolate. You could do the same thing.
Well, that's it. That's next. So I actually heard that it's like there's people on those farms that export the product that have never had milk chocolate.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So a random aside about chocolate, then we'll get back on track. We do this all the time, John. So chocolate, I am a sucker for like a story and a cause, and like I want to help. Yeah. And so when I hear something, when I hear that like a product is made in a poor way or that it's got, you know, a bad history behind, I'm like, I don't want that thing anymore.
Right.
My husband and I are both vegan, and we go to like Veg Fest in Atlanta every year, and there's all these like really amazing speakers, and somebody got up and talked about the origins of chocolate, and I was like, gee, oh my gosh, like nothing left that I can eat without feeling like crap. And so now I'm like, wait, I can't eat most companies of chocolate anymore. And there's actually an app that tells you what's like fair, not even fair trade, but kind of like fair trade chocolate.
Yeah.
So like 90% of chocolate has like comes from pretty bad origins of like it's just taking advantage of people and like all these things. And I just remember thinking at the time, like, what's left for me? Like, if I can't eat chocolate, I don't know what's left. So, but you're right. There's a whole there's a similar story in chocolate. I'd say there's more players in the chocolate game than in coffee, though, which I think is an interesting position you've gotten in. So how and by the way, sorry, the MARTA thing too. I had never heard that. Fascinating. I totally can validate that from my own experience riding MARTA. I will say I've never rode MARTA to go nowhere for fun, right? Or not for fun, but for the observation. Yeah. But it's completely accurate, right? Yeah. And we'll talk about this more. And by the way, for those who don't live in Atlanta, because we have most of our listeners probably live outside of Atlanta, MARTA is what we call, it's the name of our public transportation, because it doesn't serve the city super well.
Right.
But it's not as, you know, it doesn't move. It's not, you can't like live in Atlanta without a car. I'll put it that way, versus there's other cities you can easily live in without a car. But it is our public transportation system, which is what John was referring to.
One quick thing that I'll add in before we move there, there's a guy, Willie Jennings, and one of the things that he says is geography is never an accident. And what he means is like those observations that you make, they aren't incidental or accidental. They're very intentional. And so if you go to Atlanta and Google like a map of the 1930s where Atlanta was redlined, so where predominantly black communities were outlined in red, and black families couldn't get loans, property values didn't increase. You Google the map that was created in 1930s, and you Google the census data from 2010, and what you'll find are the demographics of Atlanta are exactly the same. So the intention that was put in place in the 30s, all the people that drew that map are dead and gone. And the demographics of Atlanta today reflect, that. So those are the things that we're trying to upend, that we're saying, oh, all right, there has to be an intentional
pivoting
to people that are upwardly mobile to say, no, I'm going to move into a West End before everybody wants to live in the West End now. Yeah. I'm going to move into disenfranchised communities and invest my resources here in order to, help change things.
So. So how has Portrait been doing so far? Like, what's the experience been like for you as you've launched this company?
Yeah. So, and I say this just with respect to, again, like it's been a hard time for so many, but it's been amazing. We're so far ahead of every projection that we had. And it's just based on, it's How I Built This is one of my favorite podcasts, where it's a podcast about entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I know it. Are you going to be on it?
No. I wish that would be a dream, but one of the things that I just see there is like everybody's story has this sense of like luck, just the right place at the right time. So, I mean, our plan was let's start a coffee shop and let's roast beans on the side so that we can cut our cost of goods sold in half. And if our shop does well, then maybe we can build this brand where we're directly to consumers and start to wholesale. So we sign our lease March 1st in the West End.
March 1st, 2020, to be clear, right before there's a global
March
pandemic.
1st, 2020.
Yeah.
So we do a Kickstarter, raise the rest of our funds. We got our first round of investors, sign the lease March 1st, 2020. This is great. We're high-fiving. We're going to get this thing. All right. March 7th, a movie crew asks to lease our space. They're going to shoot some stuff and we're like, yeah, that's cool. It's going to take us a while to get permitting and all that stuff. So let's make sure that our rent's covered. Excuse me. March 12th, we shut things down because of COVID. And at this point, we read an article by a guy by the name of Andy Crouch. I forget the title, but the point was, welcome to the Ice Age. And his thing was, some people think COVID is going to be a bad snowstorm, that they're just going to have to change for a few weeks and then they'll get back. Some people think it's just going to be a bad winter. So they need to go down for 3 or 4 months and then they're going to get back. He's like, you need to think about it. No, this is the Ice Age. Things are fundamentally going to change if you can pivot the way you do business. And so we took that advice early on and we said, all right, let's lean into e-commerce. Let's lean into creating the best online presence. So at this point, like, we're driving coffee in Atlanta. If you were in Atlanta and ordered coffee, it was brought to your front doorstep by somebody with gloves and a mask on. Online, a girl on our team coined the term digital hospitality. And so we were just like, hey, let's create this. And it was just the type of thing, right place at the right time. So we have an excellent product, but it's people that were used to going to Starbucks daily and spending, $20 per week on coffee no longer drove by it on their commute to work. They're at home. They're like, well, if I'm going to be at home, I might as well learn how to make coffee. Yeah. And then we pop up and we were just like, all right, let's get things out quick. And so it was just, we worked really hard, but it was the type of thing where we were at the right place and the right time. And we met the right folks and it led to, we were a guy that's on our team that was a barista at a shop knew Kat Cole. She manages. She's the COO of this large corporation, and
is she like Cinnabon? Is that like Cinnabon?
Yeah. And she was like, "Oh, I love y'all. I'd love to help however I can." And one day she's like, "Hey, I've got a friend, Rebecca Jarvis, and Good Morning America wants to hear about businesses that have transitioned in COVID." And my business partner gets a chance and we've got, this 90-second right spot on the air. And so it's just right place at the right time. And then people come to the site and they like what they see. In our stories, we've just been, hey, we want to highlight people that we love, but maybe most of mainstream America, they don't know about. So Toni Morrison is my favorite author, named a coffee out of her. Barry Jenkins, the Oscar-winning director of Moonlight, named coffee after him because Aaron loves him. Well, it turns out Barry Jenkins is a coffee head and he found out about it and he's like, this is great. And he puts it on his Instagram. And so it's just all these things that have just been right place at the right time. And it's, that luck favors the prepared. And we just felt like the providence of God. We felt like there was somebody in control who just, for whatever reason, smiled down on us at this unique time. And then the protests this summer, and people were forced to sit back and understand more about inequality and maybe some of the things that led to that. So by and large, folks understood the importance of buying Black and supporting Black entrepreneurs. And so all of this stuff, just kind of this whirlwind, and we were just in the eye of the storm, and it's been crazy.
I'm glad you brought up, first off, I'm super happy for you and for Portrait. You guys deserve it. It's awesome. You keep saying right place, right time, but I will add right product, which you said at one point, right story, right? Like all of these things have to, collide. Yeah. And I think you guys have had an amazing year, and I am so happy for you, and you deserve it. And I like the point you just made, because it was headed where we wanted to take this now anyways, which is it also landed at a time when, all of the discussions around systemic racism and inequality, and you had a lot of people out of nowhere, I don't want to say it completely out of nowhere, but all of a sudden their eyes are opened up. They're wanting to support Black businesses, and they're looking for, little and big ways that they can help. So I want to kind of shift this discussion a little bit, because we do a good bit of interviews on this show. I don't know, maybe like 25% of our discussions are interviewing people. And, one of the things that I've even realized, or both of us have realized that we can do a better job of is bringing in more diverse voices onto the show. So I really want to use this time to have some meaningful discussion to help us, to help our listeners. And want to get, there's so many ways we could talk about this, or layers to it. But I want to just start with a little bit on, we do talk a lot about particularly personal finance, obviously, on this show, and just get your perspective specifically on income inequality, but also just thoughts in general on, some of the actions that people, and I say people like us, people like me and Mike, people like our listeners, anyone can be taking to improve what so many of us have gotten thought we knew a lot about, but got a crash course in education on during 2020. That's a lot. So
no
that was like 8 questions.
One of the first things,
I know, it was like 8 questions rolled into one. You can take it wherever you want, John.
One of the first things I would say is like, you have to like learn, right? So I found throughout this time, there's been a lot of people that have been willing to help, but willingness to help without the requisite wisdom to know what to do always leads into a disaster, right? Whenever anybody says, but I was only trying to help, you can be assured like a train wreck just took place because their willingness wasn't met with wisdom, right? Yeah. And so there is an aspect where I think things are complex and we need to process. And the first thing I'd say is, if you want just a baseline understanding about, the racial wealth gap, Mirza Baradaran, her book, The Color of Money, it is a fantastic book. It's called Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap. I read a lot of books, right? So 50 plus most years. And this is probably one of the most important pivotal books I've read in the last 5 years. And she just outlines, like, she goes back from post-slavery to Reconstruction. That in Reconstruction, Black folks were set free and told for the first time, y'all can make money and save money in these banks. So they created a thing called the Freedmen's Bank. And so they were told, hey, land is going to be the way that y'all generate wealth. And so work hard, don't gamble your money away, save it and invest it in this bank. And then you can buy a house. The problem was Black people were investing their funds in the bank, but the banks wouldn't loan money to Black people. So Black people couldn't buy homes. And then on top of that, the people that actually controlled the banks were not Black people, and they gambled the money that the bank had away on the railroads burst, half of black wealth is gone. And basically all that black folks get at that time is a condolence card that says, sorry for your loss, right? So those types of things start to make sense of, like, to this day, my wife's grandparents, right, are like, no, I don't trust banks. I'm not going to put my money in the bank. But then it's like things go on, like you find yourself in a place where, because communities of color couldn't get these low interest rates, when they find themselves trying to start businesses, any industry that a white person gets into, that they try to get into, it costs them twice as much to put forward a product that's half as good. So when the black folks that live in their community, who are already getting paid less, even when they want to support, it's irresponsible for them to support other black entrepreneurs. So the people that could make money, and this is like just the like sad part, but you drive through any predominantly African American community, and what you're likely going to find is a funeral home with somebody's name on it. And the reason why is because back at this time, early on, dealing with Black death was the only industry that Black people could make their wealth off of, because there were folks at the time that were okay with lynching Black bodies. They just didn't want to be bothered with burying them. So you just look at just how dehumanizing that is to know, in order for me to be able to economically uplift my community, I've got to step into an industry that I know I'm not going to get competitively beat out of. And then that fast forward to the FHA and those loans being made, and you start to learn that there was no white middle class until the Federal Housing Authority came up with these loans where families didn't have to put 20% down on a house, but could get a home and build wealth through the normal means. But Black people weren't afforded that same opportunity. And so things go and go and go. The gap increases and increases and increases. And then the civil rights movement hits, and they say, all right, we shouldn't treat anybody based on the color of their skin. And they're like, so we're not going to advantage Black folks just because of the color of their skin. We're not going to undo the wrongs, because for us to undo the wrongs would be to treat somebody based on the pigment of their skin. And we're well above that. So, Ira Katz-Nelson has an amazing book, When Affirmative Action Was White. And so there's just all of these things in history that I would say that the first place is reading history as written from the perspective of the people that were shafted, and realizing that the problem that we see goes deeper than what we thought that it was. So charity can't be the way that we solve such a complex problem.
You there's so much in what you just said. I'm going to hit a couple of things and just in response. One, I've got that book written down, so we'll put it in the show notes, and I'm going to commit to read it, and I'm going to commit. Mike will commit himself, but we love reading the same books.
And I'd love to chat with you all after you read it.
I was going to say, maybe we could get you back on the show to talk about it.
Yeah, cool.
But the other thing is, I'm going to get to some questions in a minute, but
it'll take her a while to get there.
It'll take me a minute. When I went to just check the name to make sure I got the name of the book that you were saying. And so I immediately found it on Amazon. It's The Color of Money, Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap by Mirza Baradaran.
Yep.
I'm not sure I got that right. But so I immediately, we always talk about like saving money, John. And so I get my books from the public library.
Right.
at the time. So I went to my library app, but while I was doing it, I was like, no, this is a book where like I should actually buy it and support the author, because this is again one of the tiny things I can do to help. And I actually will give just a shout out to the author, because there's a 17-week hold on this book at the library, which is really long, which means a lot of people are reading it right now. So it's on hold by that many people. Reason number 2 why I will just buy the book on Amazon. So many things in what you just said, though. And one of the things that you talked about, which I really appreciate, is just the importance of learning and educating yourself.
Yeah.
And just for myself personally, it is what I have spent, a lot of time doing myself this year. Right. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I thought I grew up in a fairly diverse community and diverse schools growing up. Right. Where I lived was less diverse. The schools I went to were more diverse. And I thought I knew a lot. And I thought I was very open-minded and, all these things. And I didn't fully even understand and appreciate and have, so like the background you just talked of, the history of like how systemic certain things are and how much certain systems are set up to build certain people up and just create failure for certain people. I was not fully aware of and like eyes wide open on a lot of those things. And so I myself have done a lot of reading and learning this year. And we've had, so many conversations at work about this. Like I sit on our diversity and inclusion board at work even. And so we talk about that. We have been talking about this a lot. It has been like the topic of 2020, as you know. Right. The thing that, and this is where it will turn into a question, is the thing that I personally at times have struggled with and have asked, others for help with is in the pivoting from listening and learning and educating yourself into action and what you can do to help. And one of the questions I want to ask is, what can people do to help more broadly, but also specifically on the income inequality and the wealth inequality piece? Yeah. Like what can regular people do? And I say regular people as in just like people that don't have a huge platform to speak on, or, I know like famous people, there's a lot they can do to help because they can get the message out and everything else. Like what could people like Mike and I do to help?
Yeah. I say these things with trepidation in that part of what makes offering solutions before people have done the work to understand the nature of the problem is that even saying what you say in the solution can be misinterpreted if people don't have the schema or the framework to be able, like if they don't have a bucket to place it in, right? Yeah. If people don't know what has led to the nature of the problem, then saying things like, ordinary things that you do, it is important to intentionally, as much as you can, shift and try to buy from minority entrepreneurs, right? So buying from Black-owned businesses, when you buy your, coffee, when you go to get your car fixed, things like that. Like people don't know all of what's gone into it. So it can just kind of seem like this blanket affirmative action until you realize like it seems discriminatory and then it doesn't seem like it'll do a bunch. It seems minuscule.
Small. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, it's small. Like an acorn is small, but the thing about acorns is that they start off small, but they can become oak trees, right? So you don't judge the benefit of planting a seed by the initial impact of that seed. You judge it by the eventual yield, right? So it's like, there's a reason why nonprofits in African American communities often run out of the funding that they have, because the people that sit on their boards that are wealthy are significantly less wealthy than their white counterparts. Those people that sit on the boards don't have the same networks of wealth, right? So it's like when you contribute to Buy Black and buy in groups like that, you're not just helping the bottom line of the person that sits at the top, but you are like that person that sits at the top, that sits on the board of a non-profit trying to do good work, can actually reinvest more into his community, right?
When the whole value chain is.
Yeah. And so this is where, Mirza Radharan's book is so good because it explains banking, which is something that I never learned in school. I never learned how banks work and how banks actually, in this strange sense, they create money or they create wealth. So if I own a home and I bank with this bank and now I sell this home, then the bank gets money for the sale of the home, which it can loan out to generate more money, but the bank still owns that home. So it's continuing to collect money. And so it's just, she explains how banks create wealth and how black banks have often failed because they've been, robbed of assets or, So I don't want to go too far into the book, but I think it's the best way that I can just do this, say a bank has an hourly employee, right? Say they pay them $10 per hour. If somebody comes in and makes a $500,000 deposit, it costs the bank $10 to take the deposit. If 10 people come in and make $1 deposit, then it's going to cost and each one of those deposits take an hour. Now it actually costs the bank $100 to take in $10, right? So you see how that math starts to work. If people put money in a bank and continually come and take those funds out because they need it to pay their bills, then the bank has less on hand to loan. If a bank has a bunch of millionaires that come to that bank and they're not going to touch those funds, now this bank can keep less cash on hand and use more to loan more. So you even see the discrepancy in all of that. And so, your actual dollars on where you spend them matter, like acorns planted in the ground matter.
That's a really important point for people, because I think when people are faced with what can I do to help, this is so very easy and actionable and understandable, because you're going to go spend money anyways, you're going to go buy coffee anyways, but you can go support a business and support a community and contribute to improving a situation. And it is really, there is no downside to you. It may not even cost you more money. It may be the same opportunity.
It often does not cost you any more money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So John, that is a very tangible, easy, everybody should be doing it thing. And I think we've seen a pretty meaningful uptick of that even in 2020. Yeah. What else? Are there any other kind of nuggets of things that you think people can and should be doing more of?
Yeah. I think I'm just going to end with this. People have to learn, right? And so I know that was the first step, but who was it? John Dewey, the educator, said, a problem well defined is a problem half solved. And I feel like in our social media age of actions and activism and real time Instagram story of what I'm trying to do to help out, people don't want to take the time to really understand the nature of the problem. And what I found is that the people that have done the most significant work are the people that have spent the most time understanding the nature of the problem, that by the time they really dive deep and see how far things go, they've got a million action items that they could take, and they're not spending as much time saying, what can I do? Because there's ideas and things that come up. And so I would say, step one, learn. Step two, use your dollars wisely to support minority businesses. And step 3, learn some more.
Yeah, I love the you just doubling down on that focus of learning and educating yourself, because I will say, for what it's worth, I'm not asking that question because I personally don't necessarily know what I could do. I'm asking it because I want to. I think there are a lot of people I talk to who are kind of like well-intentioned, but don't exactly know what to do. Right. And I'll put a link to this in the show notes. But there's one of the books that I've read this year that has been the most helpful in not changing my mindset, but re-educating, like educating me deeper in areas that I thought I knew things about, but just in learning I really didn't, is this book called Me and White Supremacy, Combat Racism, Change the World, and Become a Good Ancestor. And the author puts a list towards the end where she's kind of going through what a list of things that I took as an action list, but she was kind of positioning it as what it looks like to be willing to look at your white privilege. And it was like, taking responsibility for your own anti-racist education. It's funny, every time I actually ask someone, particularly, just to be clear, particularly someone who is Black, the question that I just asked you, I always feel a little guilty because I'm like, I am very clear and well educated, particularly this year, that it is not your job to tell me what I should be doing. That is one learning that I get, and may have unintentionally, what is the word? What's the word? Unintentionally done in the past. And so I certainly don't ask you from that perspective. I ask you as someone who I, trust and respect. But I love the fact that she like literally provides a list for those who really are sort of stuck. And it's everything from, supporting Black businesses to donating to, organizations that are helping in this area. Calling out, there's a lot of things that I've taken even that I can do within my own company as a hiring manager, as a leader within a company, calling out other people when they're doing things that, are not appropriate and or pushing things in the right direction. And so anyways, I say that as in, we can put some additional resources in our show notes for people also. But I just love your point on kind of doubling down on like, as you take take the accountability to learn and educate yourself, in that will come the what you can and should do personally.
Absolutely.
Which I love. I think that's a good note to start to wrap this up on. But as we do that, is there anything else that you want to share, particularly just kind of in the topic we were just talking around wealth gaps and inequality?
I'll put one other book there, again, just because I love books, and we'll put it in the show notes. And just know, like, all the books that I'm going to give y'all, these are my like 10 out of 10 stars, right? So I'm not going to give you any duds. Democracy in Black, How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul. Eddie Glaude wrote that book, and it is just an excellent primer on race. So for folks that find things like, they may still say, what was the big deal with Trayvon Martin? Or I hear folks talk about all this stuff. Eddie Glaude does a great job and just talks about like the concept of opportunity deserts, or things like white fear, and how kind of the myth of the Black man is savage and dangerous basically ends up with things like a George Zimmerman who could get off because the court was convinced that a concrete slab was a weapon in the hands of a teenage Black man. And so, Glaude just does a great job of really starting to show like why race is such an important part of the world in which we live. And so, Mirza Baradaran's book, Eddie Glaude's book, Ira Katznelson, When Affirmative Action Was White. And her thing is just concepts predate the naming of their concept. So you may actually have your child first, and then a week later, give him a name. Oh, he looks like Billy. And so affirmative action was that thing. It actually existed in that you had people being favored because of the color of their skin, it wasn't given its name until it was aimed at Black people trying to undo what went wrong. So just those 3 books just set up a helpful paradigm and a grid to be able to interpret all of what is going on in our world.
Yeah, I love it. These are actually 3 books that I've not heard recommended before, and I'm sure they're recommended all the time. I've not personally heard them. And so they're all in my Amazon cart right now.
Okay.
And I am excited to read them and have more conversations, after we do.
Thank you all though.
Yeah.
This has been an honor. Yeah.
I really appreciate, I know we said this at the start, but I really appreciate you coming on. I'm sensitive to are you still getting up at 4 a.m. in the morning?
I'm still getting up at 4 a.m.
Yeah, what time do you go to bed?
Like 10:30.
That's impressive. Yeah, I feel like you're not getting enough sleep, John.
I've so this has been since grad school. So, since 21, so 15 years, 5.5 hours is good for me, and I function well. I'm
going to send you some sleep studies at a later date.
Okay.
That show you the impact of that much sleep on your health long term. But separate point. Right. Only because I care about you.
That's it. All right.
I know the coffee's helping in the morning. But anyways, I'm impressed that you get up at 4 a.m. I love that that's the name of your podcast. We actually interviewed a guy named 5 a.m. Joel a few weeks ago that I love. And his things, he gets up really early, and he started getting up early. And he talks about the value of it, which I know you talk about on your podcast.
Yeah. We should let 5 a.m. Joel know that he's been one-upped.
I know. Yeah.
4 a.m.
I'm going to be 3 a.m. Maggie, except 3 a.m. is when I go to bed. It's not when I wake up.
So you're a night owl.
I am a night owl. Yeah. I mean, I will be up until 1 a.m. tonight, probably. Not 3. That's pretty late.
Yeah, that's my wife too.
So the thought of getting up at 4 a.m. is that's right in the middle of my sleep cycle.
Right.
But I am impressed by people who do it. I cannot thank you enough for coming on and talking to us. I hope someday we can even do this again. And let me know when Portrait starts making decaf coffee.
I will. That's actually
because I quit caffeine years ago. So, but I love coffee. I love decaf. There's a lot of, I would say a lot of people. I think there's a market for decaf out there.
No, I think that there is too. That's next up. We've got a special one releasing this week, and then
awesome.
Nice. I'll be your. If you need a name, you can call it Maggie because
got you because it came from you.
I like you're naming coffees after Toni Morrison, and I'm suggesting that you name a coffee after
Maggie Tucker.
But no, we greatly appreciate you coming on. I know your time is very valuable.
Yeah.
And you're just awesome to come on and join us for this discussion.
Yeah.
Is there any parting piece of wisdom you'd like to leave folks with tonight?
Yeah. One of the reasons why I started doing my podcast is that, 2020 has just sucked for a lot of people. It has felt very, very dark. And one of the blessings that I found out is getting up at 4 a.m. It has kind of become this act of hopeful defiance for me, where you wake up at 4 a.m. and everything around you says that it's nighttime, but it's not. And so it's like each day I'm reminded that, just because it's dark outside, it doesn't mean that it's not morning, right? And the sun doesn't have to be shining for it to be a new day. That my commitment is I just want to get up and live and wait for my circumstances to catch up. And that's what I just want to share with folks. Y'all live now and wait for your circumstances to catch up. The sun is eventually going to rise, and you have the choice to either wait around until it does or to rise before it and inspire other people to hope. So
I love it. I'll also just layer onto that, John. If you can't rise before it, you could stay up past it.
That's it. Same thing.
If you're not able to get up that early in the morning, I'm working on both ends of it.
Right.
But I love it. No, for anyone who wants to hear more from John, I would highly recommend his podcast 4 in the Morning. And your first episode, which is like a 3-minute intro, it actually has so much depth in it. Like I thought about our intro and I was like, oh my God, our intro is crap. It has so much depth in it. It explains what you just said and kind of the hopeful defiance concept. And it's lovely. So if anybody wants just a taste of what they would get through your broader podcast, I thought your introduction was absolutely amazing and inspirational in such a short period of time.
Yeah. Thanks, Maggie.
So thank you again for coming on.
Maggie, Mike, it's an honor. Really is.
Thanks, John.
I hope this isn't the last time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. Bye, John.
Bye.
Peace.
Thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard today, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. If you have thoughts or questions, we'd love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370 or hit us up on Instagram or Facebook, and we'll have all those links in the show notes.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Maggie.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Bye.
Bye.